this talk. We'll cover why should we use HTML and CSS instead of JavaScript, the browser support of some of these new features, and then we'll go over them and some things from I/O as well. First of all, once upon a time, there was Jumbo Jason. Now, Jumbo Jason, he's very bloated. He uses lots of JavaScript. I hope there's no one called Jason here. This is as opposed to Slim Steve. So Slim Steve, he just uses HTML and CSS, which are very lightweight in comparison. Now Jason, he's getting bloated and bloated as he adds in NPM libraries. So how did Jason get here? Let's say he wants to introduce scroll snap functionality to his website. What's scroll snap? Well, just ignoring this code for now. Say we've got this section A and then we scroll to section B. And you'll see I'm letting go of my touchpad here and it will jump to the nearest section. So that's scroll snap functionality. So Jason finds an NPM library to do this. He's using React, he loves React, so let's use scroll snap React. And you'll see it's 23.3 kilobytes. And we're loading that with every page request. And of course, libraries can get hacked. You've got to maintain them. You've got to update dependencies. There's all this hassle with libraries. Well, why not use CSS instead? So here in the HTML, I've got a section, which is my container element. And then I've got my A, B, and C children inside this container. So you can see here, B would be that one there. And so I've got some CSS here. I've got some removing margin on the body, so these go right up to the edge. I've got some nice pretty colors, and then I'm just sizing stuff to be the full viewport height. What's interesting, what's new is scroll snap type here on the parent. So Y mandatory means snap in the Y direction up and down, and mandatory means you must snap. There's other values as well. And then on the child, I just say scroll snap align, center, center. So we're snapping in both directions. Probably a bit overkill, but there's all sorts of functionality there. And you can see this is purely just HTML and CSS now. I like to think of this as a library that's already in the browser, and it's a 0 kilobyte download. So why not use it if it's there? Well, you might not want to use it because of browser support. Who's used Can I Use before? A few people. So Can I Use is a wonderful website where you can look up a new web feature and see what browsers actually support it currently. My favorite tab on this is usage relative. Can everyone see that all right? So usage relative shows you, so the height of each bar is based on how many users actually use that browser, because we don't really care about browser support. We care about user support. So we want to see how many users use the browser that we're supporting. And you can see here a lot of people use Chrome, and this feature is in all 3 major browsers. And so we've got this new baseline figure up the top. Has anyone heard of baseline before? Like 3 or 4 people. So baseline simplifies this a bit. So the first one is widely available. So this means use the feature. Use it. Don't worry, just use it. So it's been in all 3 major browsers for 2.5 years, I think it is, a bit more. Everyone's got it, essentially. Newly available means that it's in all major browsers, but we're still waiting on people to update. People might need to buy the latest iPhone, or they might just need to update their browser. But I think 2.5 years is enough. And then there's limited availability. So this means it's in at least 1 major browser, but we're still waiting on other browsers to catch up and implement it. So you can start playing around with it, or you can use it as a progressive enhancement. So let's say Jason now wants to build a carousel. Very popular thing on the web. Oh, he's resorting to JavaScript again. He's getting very heavy on the code. Well, we've got CSS for this now. So we've got some new pseudo elements and properties, and the browser support is getting there. We can start using these today. With a polyfill. Has anyone heard of a polyfill? So for those who don't know, let's say we want to start using these new features now. We don't want to wait until, do we support 95% of people, 98, 99? When do we start using a new feature? Well, now. So add a polyfill I know it's JavaScript that fills in the gaps with what HTML and CSS don't yet do, but it's like an NPM library that we can delete later. That's much better than an NPM library that we can't delete later. So with carousels, this is a demo. I think this was at I/O. So this is Pinterest. We've got a nice little carousel here. You can see we've got buttons to go left and right through the images. We've got these little, I'm not sure what they're called, the little dots at the bottom, which you often see with this type of UI. We've even got a sidebar here. And then you'll notice we're clicking in the middle of that image there and dragging. And that actually moves us between images. So if you built this yourself, or if you're relying on some library, that functionality might not be there. But since we're using the browser mechanisms for this, we don't have to think about it. It's just done. It's just there. We implement the HTML and CSS, and the browser does the rest for us. So Pinterest added this to their website, and Google was, flexing that quite a bit at I/O. 90% reduction in code, right? So that's amazing. That means there's 90% less code going over the wire. They're going to speed up the website, it's going to save people data, and it's going to save the environment. So what are some more features? Shape is one. Pretty decent browser support. It's in Chromium and Safari. Waiting on Firefox. It's behind a flag in Firefox. Do people know what a flag is in new web features? So let's say I've got this new feature I want to add to web browsers, but I'm still fleshing out how it's going to work. I'm not fully decided on the implementation. But on the web, we've got to support things for all of eternity. It can never die. So we want to figure these things out before we support it for all of eternity. So we have a flag. So what a flag is, I can go into my browser and I can enable developer features or experimental web platform features. And that means anything behind a flag is now available. So it means that web developers, we can play around and figure out how something should work and give feedback to browser developers before it's implemented forever in browsers. So you can see here, Firefox has shape behind a flag. So that means they've already implemented most of it. They're just finalizing some things. So traditionally with path, we've already had it in CSS, but it's not CSS, it's SVG. So this is an SVG path. Does anyone not know what SVG is? One person? Sorry, I should have framed that the other way. So SVG essentially allows you to draw a graphic on the screen, but with text. So you're providing the computer instructions on how to draw the graphic on the screen. So instead of sending like a traditional image, the entire array of pixels, you just send a few instructions on where to go and where to draw the actual SVG shape. So traditionally we've had that, but with CSS now, we can use CSS units to size our shape. Because traditionally we had just traditional and SVG view box. Now we can size things with, there's over 50 units in CSS we can use now. And we've also got other new keywords and functionality. So one of those quality of life things. Another cool feature, hyphenate limit cars. Pretty good browser support, just waiting on Safari there. So what this lets you do, I won't go through it in too much depth. Normally, if you have a really small box with big text in it, it's going to overflow. And so I'll zoom in a little bit. So what we normally do, we can do hyphens auto, and we'll hyphenate a word so that it can fit within a box. It'll hyphenate wherever the browser decides. But what if we don't want the browser deciding that? We can now define it with hyphenate limit cars. So I'm not going to go into depth, but essentially lets you see here, this one overflows a bit, this one hyphenates early. You can fine tune that more. Another cool thing, details and summary elements. So has anyone ever seen an FAQ section on the web where you click and expand a section? Lots of people, awesome. So we've got some, like a marker pseudo element and a few other features with that we'll investigate. So I've got a details summary here. So the details element is the entire FAQ item. And then the summary is always visible. And then the details within are only visible when you expand it. So here I've got our summary here, and I click it, and it expands to the content. So I don't need JavaScript for that. It's just 2 HTML elements and no CSS. But I can style it as well. So say I want to style the marker. So that's this little bit here, which we get automatically. So I can style that, and I can define the content. That could be a character, an emoji. I think you can use an image as well. And now we've got like a red arrow there. You can only do the content, font size, color, and some transitions, and a few other sort of little bits, but that's about it. You don't get too much flexibility there, but it's good you can style them. Maybe you want to style something based on whether the details is expanded. So you can see here, it doesn't change now when I expand it. So with that, we can use the open pseudo class with our marker pseudo element again, and now we can style for that state. So it'll change. And you can see it's transitioning there as well. You can also style the content. So when our details is open, we'll style the details content. And you can see here we've got a nice background image there. Fun little bonus thing here, this background image. We're using a different color space to merge these two colors together. You'll see if I remove this color space, it'll look really ugly. And it's looked like this for decades. So that's how it normally goes to gray and then back. So much nicer to have these new color spaces. And you can see here we've got a UL as well. So this list here, normally with your list, you'd have like dot points for an unordered list in HTML. Well, now you can actually use this marker pseudo element on lists as well. So if I remove this X here, we'll get a bit of text before each item. Note for accessibility, like you can't select it. I'm not sure whether it's read by screen readers. It's purely stylistic usually, and we can declare a color and all sorts. So those are some new pseudo elements to play with. Say you want a pop-up on the screen. You know, have you ever been to a website where you want to look for some information and, oh, immediately there's a pop-up. Subscribe to our newsletter. We love those. So let's do them natively on the web. So we've got a new dialog element, fantastic browser support, unless someone disables them. Closed by attribute, and we've also got some new invoker stuff that we can play around with. So this second line from the top here is our dialog element. So that's the pop-up that's going to appear in front of all the content. We've got an ID on that, and then we link this button that's going to open that with the ID. So the command for attribute is part of this new invoker API, and that links our button to our dialog. And then the command is to show modal. So what show modal does is we used to have to call it through JavaScript. Now it's all HTML. It will show the dialog on top of everything else. The default style is it will gray the background a little bit. I'll show a video in a sec. And it will make the background inert. So when the background is inert, it means that if you're tabbing through stuff within the dialog that's popped up, you can't tab into the background. It's uninteractive. And then within our dialog, we've got a close button, and for that we use the command close. So here's a video showing that in action. So this is no JavaScript at all. This is all HTML and CSS. We've also got this close by attribute. So this lets us finally control how you can close a dialog. So the first option is none. So that means we're going to use JavaScript. We're going to control everything through JS. Don't let the browser do anything. The second option, bit better. The user can press escape and that will close the dialog. So the browser thinks of all these things for you. You didn't think of that, did you? So you can press escape and it'll close. Or maybe the back button. Or who knows what the browser will decide for you. But it'll let the user intuitively close your dialog. But the last option also lets a user light dismiss. And I think this is the default, where you can click outside of the dialog on the backdrop and it will close it. So many ways to close it. And as soon as someone visits your website, if marketing decides that you have to bombard them, at least do it gracefully. So we've also got popover. So if you don't want a dialog taking over the whole screen, maybe you just want one small UI on top of the screen somewhere, not taking up everything. Popover is perfect for that. I've got a confab talk on this. So I spoke about this at Web Directions. You can go and find it online. think it might be behind a paywall, you can reach out to me, I'll give you a link. And with that, you can do things like toast notifications. So you might want a tiny little notification in the corner that's on top of everything, but it's not stealing focus from the whole page. Popover is perfect for that. You can just use HTML. You might need JavaScript to trigger them. Another thing, you might want just popover menus and maybe a mega menu on a website. You can do all this with popover, but maybe you want to position things on the page. For that, we've got a new anchor positioning API. So this allows us to position elements relative to other elements. And the browser support is getting there, but like I said, you can use this today. You can polyfill this. Maybe you could have it work on some devices, but not others. You can definitely play around with it. So this is a demo Google showed off at I/O. So there's no JavaScript here. We're having elements pop over on top of other elements. And you can see the seat selection was behind the third pop over there. So we've got this layering effect. And we're positioning elements relative to each other with anchor positioning. This is all just HTML and CSS. Another new feature, a bit smaller, you can do more with the attribute function now. Has anyone used the attribute function in CSS? Nobody. Well, now you can use it for much more. So it used to be just for a pseudo element where you could style the content based on your HTML. So let's say you have access to the styles of your website, but you don't have access to the markup. So you've got a content management system and you can't control that at all. That's somebody else, but you can control the styles. Well, you can use the attribute function to pull in information from the CMS and style accordingly. Well, now you can use that in much more places. So here we're using the color in the markup, and maybe you want to style something based on attribute. You can change the color. You can use, so CSS has typing. Does anyone know CSS has types? So one of those is color. So you have to specify what type this data is going to be. So we'll pass in the data attribute, the type, and then we've also got this as a fallback here, red. So if we don't understand what's in the markup, we'll fall back to red. And you might think, how can I use this today? Well, you could have a fallback line above that. You could have color red as a fallback. And then if the browser doesn't understand at all what any of this means, any of this line, can you see my cursor? If none of that makes sense to the browser, it will just ignore it. So you can have an entire line above that, color red, and that will just fall back gracefully. But the browser support is pretty good. It's in Chrome. People need to update, or Safari and Firefox need to implement it. Another cool thing, scroll state queries. So these, going back to earlier, allow you to style something based on the scroll state. So has anyone ever had like a nav bar that you have to show or hide based on scroll? Now you can do it just with CSS. So you can see there we've got a nice fading nav bar, all native, no JavaScript. Another cool thing, text box. So has anyone tried to center text in a button? It's a pain. So quick refresher on fonts. So from the bottom of like a normal letter to the top of a normal letter that's not like capitalized or got extra bits on top, that's known as the X height. And then you've got extra height for tall letters or extra bits and bobs in other languages even. So you've got this X height and then cap height and a baseline height and all sorts of things. But you might want to tell the browser, I only want to allow enough height to this text for the X height. And any excess height, I want to just overflow into the padding. And that will allow you to center text visually more inside of a button or any other use case. It also helps with font loading in browsers. So you can quickly change between a font that's already loaded and one that you're downloading. So a lot of uses for this feature. It's a real quality of life improvement. And the browser support is really not bad. We're just waiting on Firefox and people to update. Last but not least, absolutely amazing progressive enhancement right here is view transitions. So the web, traditionally, it's lagged behind native because you'll navigate between pages and you'll get a nice, lovely blank white screen, right? Does anyone like that? Good. So now you can smoothly animate between two pages. So we've got two APIs here. So there's multi-page apps and there's single-page apps as a simplification. So single-page apps, let's do everything in React land. Let's just load tons of megabytes of JavaScript and we will change pages for you through scripting. Multi-page apps is let's load an entirely new document between navigations. And so there's two APIs for each of these approaches. So you can call the view transition API through JavaScript, or excitingly, you can animate between multi-page navigations. So you could have an ancient website built on, I don't know, some ancient technology, but it's outputting HTML. You can add a few lines of CSS and have an animation between pages. And even better, with the proper security headers, you can have an animation cross-origin. So you could be navigating from website A.com to B.com and have a transition between them. I've got a demo here. So this is like some music app, and I click this play button and it goes full screen. And notice the URL bar here. It's going to be a full page navigation. But we didn't see an empty white screen of ick. We just got a nice transition. Isn't that amazing? So this is just a few lines of CSS. And you can see here, this lady here is dancing, and she will continue dancing through the transition. Isn't that amazing? That's just exceptional. So no freezing, no jump cuts or anything. It's just a nice, smooth transition. And the browser does all this for you. You just have to put in a few lines of CSS. So, are you going to be Jumbo Jason and load in megabytes, gigabytes of JavaScript? Or are you going to be Slim Steve? And are you going to take these features home, research them a bit more, and add them live to production? Because you can progressively enhance them, you can use polyfills, and you can start using all this today. Don't have to worry about browser support. You can flexibly add them in with all these features. Any questions?
You showed some customization for the expanding out sections.
Yep.
What about some of the others, like with the carousels, for instance? Can you change the buttons?
Yes, you can. I didn't go too in depth into those because 20 minutes. But yeah, you can find all sorts of cool demos online. You can really customize everything you want, definitely. So yeah, you can style exactly how they appear and all sorts of things with CSS. Yeah. And last resort is always JavaScript. But last resort. Any other questions?
All the, you probably call them dialogues. Yeah. The dialogues.
Yep.
Is it still possible to like add a button with only HTML and CSS that may close the dialogue, or is it you have to add JavaScript?
As in having a button within the dialogue that closes it?
Yes.
Yes. Let me go back. This one here. So command for my modal. So we're linking it to the modal there, and then command close, and that will close it without any JavaScript. Yeah.
It doesn't matter if it's in the dialogue or outside the dialogue, but it's still visible if you...
I don't think it matters where it is, yeah. As long as you can access it, it closes the dialogue.
If it's outside the modal, then it's inert, so it has to be inside.
It has to be inside if the background is inert. But if the background isn't inert, like you call it with another method, I think it will still close the dialogue. Yep.
Not all dialogues are modal, right?
Yep. Any other questions? Is there anything stopping someone from implementing these new features? Put your hand up if you're unsure whether you want to use some of these new features.
Who doesn't do what?
What are you unsure about?
I hear a lot of things about like the amazingness of the front-end frameworks and all this like other stuff, and I'm very confused whether I use static or whether I use a framework to do web stuff.
Whether to use a framework or not? I think you definitely have to use frameworks for especially big applications. I think people could invest in learning the framework more. So I find a lot of people, not hating on React at all, but a lot of framework devs, they love their framework Disneyland, and I'll go back to this slide. Sorry, there's so many slides. Where's Jumbo's favorite NPM library? It was back further. Oh, where was it? Something kilobyte. There it is. So React Disneyland. Oh, look, there's a scroll snap React library. Let's use this. And I mean, it's great being able to just pull in a library and have all that built for you. But try and remember this talk and remember, oh, I can do that with HTML and CSS. Because you're sending all of this down the wire and it adds up quick. Like so many libraries adding up. And that's a lot of download. So if people are on a slow connection, which, I mean, modern day, there's so many fast connections, but, you know, I get internet dropouts on the train to work in metropolitan Melbourne with cell towers everywhere. And so, like, just reduce what you can because people are on slow connections and it really does matter. And you're saving the environment. So just use HTML and CSS where you can. When you're using a library, just consciously know, what is it doing? What am I actually loading? So think about those things, like what am I actually loading and what is actually happening behind the scenes? Not, you know, try and peep outside of React Disneyland. Yeah.
Let's have a deeper conversation about frameworks at Dritz.
Yes. Yeah. So yeah, more questions.
Not
One
that
more.
doubt, just to add to that, that when I used to use these NPM packages, I had very little control with what stylings took effect or took importance. Which again, if we stick to using more HTML and CSS, we can avoid because we have the control over what needs to get precedence.
That's a very good point. Yeah, it makes it easier to, you're not fighting against libraries. Yeah.
The argument against bad web components.
You can get around that. Another discussion for the pub. All right. Yep. I'll pass over to Kaz.